Hi guys, this is Coach Amber from Racquet Volleyball and Fistball Club. Today we are going to be talking about fistball picking and the importance of pushing the ball when you're in serve receiver, when you're in defense. So a big thing that we like to talk to our athletes about is in-system versus out-of-system balls. And the reason why this is really important is because when you're the first person touching the ball, when it comes over the net, you want to have an objective to where you're trying to place the ball versus just being reactive to whatever is given to you and hoping that it goes up or forward. And a big thing is that we like to define what is in system and what is out of system, so then you have a better idea of what your main objective is when you're picking the ball. So the first thing is, what is in system? So in system is a ball picked to an area of the field where the setter doesn't exert a lot of energy to set. An example of that is from 1 meter to 11 meters. So let's say that you're a back player and you're here and a ball is picked from here. You would want to try to get the ball from anywhere here forward. So when the ball is pushed, it'll bounce in this area, and then your setter will be able to get to that ball and be able to set the ball. An out-of-system ball, there's a lot more examples of that, and in sports, generally speaking, that is how it works. And the reason is because in-system is a very precise thing. It's to maximize the abilities of all of the players on the field, and if you're setting your team up into an in-system play, then the setter doesn't have to use as much motion, and if there's less motion, now there's less variables to a set, and if there's less variables, then the strikers know where the set is going, or if the ball is a lot closer, there's less movement to the ball left and right, so the strikers will have an easier time, which is what we'll discuss in a little bit. So out of system is where the setter has to call help or has to work really hard to make adjustments. So generally speaking, distance-wise, that would be from 11 meters, so about 12 meters back, all the way to the end line and even further back, because sometimes when people pick the ball and they shank it, it will go off the court, which means that they're going to have to take the ball out of the air, and that will increase the chances of making a mistake as a set. The next thing is if the ball is along the sidelines. So the reason why an out-of-system ball is along the sidelines is because a setter may not know if the ball is going to bounce outside or inside of the field, and that may force them to have to take it out of the air if they're not 100% sure. And if they're taking it out of the air, that means that now they don't have the time for the bounce to slow the ball down, and there's a lot of force coming into their arm. So if their form isn't perfect, they may shank the ball into an area of the field that they don't want it to go to. Another thing is if a setter is taking the ball along the sidelines, then that also means that they might have to force the ball back into the court, which means that when the ball does in fact bounce, now the angle of the ball might pass one of the strikers and they might have to lean for the ball or use their non-dominant arm, and that could increase the chances of us making a mistake or sending a free ball over. The other thing is, let's say that it is in the in-system zone, but the height or the trajectory or the speed of the ball is not controlled. That also can make it out of system. So sometimes we have players who will push the ball really far where it's near the net, but if it's too low and doesn't give the setter enough time to travel under the ball and it's very, very shooty, then it may make it that the setter is off balance when they're setting the ball. Another thing is also if it's really low, that means that the bounce, so let's say the ball bounces, it's going to be a very low bounce versus if a ball comes from really high, it might bounce more like this. So then it'll give the setter more time to get under the ball even after the bounce, versus if the ball's lower, it's going to shoot forward and it's going to take even more effort for the setter to get to it. So you don't want to have it too low if you're trying to push it. It's better to push high first and then forward. But again, we still want to work on pushing the ball forward, keeping that height and that control. The next thing is hard angles to the left or the right. So let's say that I'm a back player and I take a ball in the seam and I shank a ball on a hard angle this way. That means that the setter is now going to be running from either here or here over to one of the sides of the field, and that may increase the chances of them using their non-dominant arm, or they're going to chase it even closer to the sideline. And just like we were talking about before, if the ball bounces on the inside of the field, you don't have to worry about letting the ball bounce because it's inside of the field, but let's say that there's a hard angle on it, that means that it's going to keep going this way, and even after the bounce, they're going to have a tough time getting the ball back into the field. So you want to make sure that you're keeping the ball in the center of the field, so then the setter doesn't have to call help, because typically speaking, any ball that lands over here, a lot of younger setters will ask for help and have one of the strikers take the set, and then they just become a striker, or the other striker is the striker. So you don't want to force your setter out. You want to make sure that you're putting the ball in an area of the field where they're capable of setting without utilizing a lot of movement or exerting a lot of energy to get to the ball. The last thing that we want to talk about is how angles matter when you're setting the ball. So on here I have a triangle, and what I'm demonstrating here is that as the ball continues to travel, it may make it a lot harder for strikers to strike. And in this example, the angle is identical, but the difference is where the setter is setting from. So if a setter gets under the ball, and let's say that they have this angle, I don't know what it is, it's probably like 20-degree angle, right? If they push the ball away from their center line, which is here, you can see how much further the ball may go to the left or the right just from the same angle. So the closer the pick is to the net, the less error that the setter is going to have. So the less the ball is going to travel to the left or the right if they make a mistake when they're setting. So even though these are the same exact angle, because this ball is traveling further, that means that a striker, let's say a left striker's here, might have to run a third of the field just to get behind the ball, versus if the ball is coming from the 3-meter line. Now, if there's a little bit of an angle change, just like up here, it's only maybe a meter or two to the left or the right, which is easy for a striker to be able to take an extra step to adjust. So this versus this increases the amount of energy that your strikers are going to need to waste to get behind the ball. So as a back player, you want to try to set the team up as best as possible by pushing that ball forward as much as possible, is to limit how much effort your setter has to make, because once the setter has to put a lot of effort in, that increases the chances of them swinging too much, or their fingers dropping, or just the angle being wrong. And now the strikers have to do a lot to adjust to that ball. And if they're wasting the energy going for that ball, now they can't take a look at the defense because they're so busy falling into the ball versus being confident with the location of the ball. So as a back player, you are very important. You're probably one of the most important players on the field, because if you don't pick the ball, if you don't set the players up for success, then the team will never have a good kill, or the setter may not have the ability to adjust to the passes that you're giving. So really take that into account when you're practicing, and be very mindful of the things that are needed for your setters and strikers to be as successful as you want them to be. So thank you so much for watching, and keep watching our series. Bye.